Ladies and gentlemen, the game is finally here. 11-0 Michigan visits 11-0 Ohio State. Number 2 versus number 3. Ohio State comes in looking for revenge. Michigan comes in looking to start a winning streak against the Buckeyes. The Wolverines lead the all-time series. Michigan is 59, 51, and 6 all-time against Ohio State. We all know what happened last year. A breakthrough year for Michigan. A 42-27 victory which put Michigan in the Big Ten championship, which they won, which put them in the college football playoff for the first time. But we also know what happened in the years prior. Ohio State won the previous 8 against Michigan and 17 of the previous 19. In fact, the last time that Michigan has beaten Ohio State in Columbus was the year 2000. That's 1 week before Blake Corum was even born. Ohio State has been dominant in most of its wins this year. The opening game against Notre Dame was closer than most people thought it would be, but then Ohio State peeled off 6 straight dominating wins over Arkansas State, Toledo, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan State, and Iowa. A few of the Buckeyes' most recent games have been interesting though. At Penn State, a team that Michigan destroyed, the Buckeyes were losing in the fourth quarter before regaining the lead and pulling away. Ohio State gave up 482 yards in that game. They also had the windy, rainy game at Northwestern where the teams were tied at the half, and Ohio State only won 21-7. CJ Stroud was 10 for 26 for 76 yards in that game. And most recently, Ohio State was in a bit of a fight with Maryland, who also played Michigan closely. Maryland had the ball down 6 with under a minute to go and a chance to win the game, but a defensive touchdown by Ohio State sealed that game. The bad news for Michigan is that all 3 of those games were on the road, and they have to travel to Columbus to take on Ohio State. And Michigan hasn't been without its own struggles, the first half against Rutgers, and then last week against Illinois. Ohio State is averaging nearly 500 yards of total offense per game. That's 8th in the country at 493. Michigan isn't too far behind at 453, which is good for 23rd overall. Both teams average over 200 rushing yards per game. Michigan at 244, 4th in the nation. Ohio State at 204, which is 20th. The passing game is where we see a big difference. Ohio State has 289 yards per game. That's good for 17th. Michigan only 209, which is 99th in the country. Both teams are putting up a ton of points this season. Ohio State 46.5 per game, which is only slightly behind Tennessee for the best in the country. And Michigan is averaging 39.4, 9th overall. These are also 2 of the best defenses in college football. Michigan is 1st in total defense, only giving up 241 yards per game. Ohio State only gives up 283, which is 9th best. Michigan gives up only 79.5 yards on the ground per game, which is 2nd overall. Ohio State 108, that's good for 15th. The passing defenses are stingy too. Ohio State gives up 176 yards per game, that's 11th overall. Michigan 162, which is good for 5th. Michigan trails only Georgia in points per game allowed at 11.73. Ohio State gives up 16.91 points per game, which is 10th. Some notes from mgoblue.com. Michigan has achieved its first 11-0 start under head coach Jim Harbaugh. Michigan is one of 2 teams ranked in the top 10 in both scoring offense and scoring defense. The only other team that can say that is the team that Michigan is facing on Saturday. Jake Moody leads the NCAA in points and field goals per game. Blake Corum is the first player in Michigan history with a rushing touchdown in 11 straight games. Saturday's game will be the 12th time that the rivals square off as top 5 teams and the 3rd time that Michigan and Ohio State meet when both programs are ranked in the top 3. Michigan has scored points in its opening possession in 9 of 11 games this season. 7 touchdowns, 2 field goals. Blake Corum ranks 3rd in the country in rushing yards, the highest total by a Wolverine since Denard Robinson's 2010 season, and the most by a Michigan back since Mike Hart's junior season in 2006. No team has reached 150 yards on the ground against Michigan this season. 9 out of the 11 teams have been kept below 300 yards of total offense. Michigan has held 5 of the last 7 teams at or below 75 rushing yards, with 3 opponents under 40 yards. Both teams come into this game pretty banged up. At the time of this recording, there is no update on Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards. And honestly, I don't really expect there to be one until shortly before kickoff. Ohio State has been battling its own injuries. Jackson Smith and Jigba has missed significant time this year, and the running backs have been banged up too. CJ Stroud is a Heisman frontrunner with 35 touchdown passes and almost 3,000 yards. He's definitely going to have a chance to have his Heisman moment against the 3rd-ranked Wolverines on Saturday. Fingers crossed that Blake Corum will also get that chance. The Buckeyes defense does not want to get embarrassed like they did in Ann Arbor last year. They hired Jim Knowles after that loss, and according to 11 Warriors, The Buckeyes have allowed just one opponent to average more than 4 yards per carry this season, and that was a Wisconsin team that ripped off a late 75-yard touchdown run against Ohio State's second stringers. Jim Knowles said you have to have some different things that you can go to at different times to try to keep the offense off balance. The things that they do, and they do them well, you just have to counterattack, and that's what we've been working on all year. Here are a few things that Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy said ahead of the game. Better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. We absolutely have so much joy playing this game, and there's that deep warrior inside of us that no matter what it takes, we're going to get it done. It's really all just noise and all just a bunch of fans that like to boo you and don't like you very much. You just do whatever you can to transmute that and use it against them. Feels like the stars are aligning, like it's finally here. It's meant to be, and we couldn't be more excited for it. We can't wait to get out there and have some fun on Saturday. What I want to see from Michigan in the game. All that really matters is a win, obviously, but first of all, I would like to see a healthy Blake Corum. Even if Blake Corum is only 75%, they're just a different team with him on the field. I'd love to see JJ play a little more loose, a little more of that backyard football. If JJ wants to have some fun, let's see it on the field. Maybe he can log some carries early to loosen up and then start slinging the ball around. He's got to give receivers a chance on the deep ball. It's better to underthrow just a little bit than to overthrow like he's been doing. At the same time, we also need the receivers to help JJ out. Get some separation. Eliminate the drops. I think the biggest key for Michigan on Saturday is to be able to run the ball. But the second biggest key is to get pressure on CJ Stroud. It's absolutely crucial. CJ Stroud will light Michigan up if they don't get to him. And Michigan has a really talented defensive line. The interior defensive line is fantastic. If they can get some pressure up the middle and make CJ Stroud uncomfortable, that's what we want. Also hoping that Mike Morris is healthy and back for the game, because without him, I'm not sure that Michigan can get a lot of pressure off the edge. Ohio State is favored by 7.5 to 9 points, which seems about right, honestly. I know that Michigan can win this game, especially if Blake Corum plays. But if Blake Corum is out, we're going to have to see JJ's best game yet as a Wolverine for Michigan to get the W. As much as I want to pick with my heart, I'm going to pick with my head and say that Ohio State will get the win 31 to 27. Ohio State is one of the most talented teams in college football, and they want revenge after what happened last season. And I just haven't seen enough from Michigan's passing game to think that they can get it done. The ground game runs into trouble. I really hope that I'm wrong. Drop your predictions below. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up. And as always, go blue. Beat Ohio State.